My friend took credit for my work until karma hit her hard. I've always been the kind of person who likes to do things right, or at least I used to think I did. I guess that's why being betrayed by someone I trusted so completely hurts more than I ever imagined it could. My name is Emily Parker. I'm 24 and I live in Chicago. I work at a mid-sized marketing firm downtown, and honestly, I love my job. Not the 9 to 5 grind or the endless corporate politics, but the actual work. The campaigns, the brand strategy, the creative problem solving. That's my thing, and I was damn good at it. I'd met Vanessa Reed in college, back when we were both struggling to survive on ramen noodles and caffeine. She had this magnetic personality that made everyone instantly like her, and I guess I was drawn to it. She was a year older, outgoing, effortlessly beautiful, and the type of person who made friends in 5 minutes flat. Me, I was quieter, more focused on the details, the logistics, the deadlines, the stuff people like Vanessa didn't always notice. Somehow, we became best friends. Or at least, that's what I thought. Fast forward to now, and I'm staring at my laptop screen in our open plan office, trying to focus on the latest project that could make or break my career. This wasn't just any campaign. This was the kind of project that could define me at this firm. The client was one of our biggest accounts, and the deadline was tight. I had worked weekends, late nights, everything. I had poured my soul into it. I had charts, mock-ups, email drafts, and strategy documents that I practically dreamed about. And then Vanessa walked in. She leaned casually against my cubicle, that signature smirk of hers plastered across her face. She was wearing this chic blouse that made it seem like she'd just stepped out of a fashion magazine, and I felt instantly annoyed. "Hey, Em," she said, twirling a pen between her fingers. "How's the big project coming along? Need any help?" I froze. Help. Of course she wanted to help. She always did. Whenever there was something I had worked hard on, she somehow found a way to be involved. Only, it rarely felt like help. Usually, it felt like she wanted to be seen as the hero while I did the grunt work. No, I think I'm good," I said cautiously, not wanting to start a fight. "I've been mapping out the strategy and visuals. I've got most of it drafted." Vanessa gave me that wide, innocent smile that made it seem like she had no idea I was suspicious of her. "Of course you do," she said. "You're amazing at this stuff. I just thought maybe I could, add a little flair." I nodded. "Sure, I mean, if you have ideas, I can take a look at them later." She nodded, as if agreeing to some unspoken pact. But deep down, I already knew. Vanessa's flair was always designed to make her shine brighter than the person who actually did the work. And yet, I told myself, she's my friend. Maybe she'll actually help this time. Over the next few days, I poured every ounce of creativity and energy I had into the campaign. I stayed late. I revised slides until my eyes blurred. I brainstormed slogans and taglines like a madwoman. I was exhausted, but I loved it. I really did. And I couldn't wait to present it. Vanessa helped, in her way, which mostly involved showing up to meetings with ideas that weren't mine, critiquing things I had spent hours perfecting, and suggesting changes that seemed innocuous but subtly made me look less confident. She was good at it, too good. She had this way of phrasing things, a kind of charm that made even my colleagues nod along without realizing she was twisting my hard work into something that looked like hers. I remember one afternoon in particular. We were prepping for a midweek internal meeting, and I was pacing around the office like a caged animal. I just want them to see the work for what it is. I confessed to my best friend, or so I thought. Vanessa shrugged, lounging in her chair like she owned the place. "They will, Em. They're smart. But, a little Polish never hurts. I just want everyone to really notice how brilliant your ideas are." Her words sounded supportive, but her eyes, there was something there. Something calculating. I didn't want to admit it, but a small knot of doubt formed in my stomach. Still, I pushed it aside. We were friends. Friends don't betray each other, right? The internal meeting came, and I presented the campaign deck, sweating bullets as I clicked through the slides. I felt a rush of pride as I explained the strategy, the target demographics, the engagement plan. I was confident, passionate, and I could see people leaning in, interested. And then Vanessa chimed in. At first, it was small things. Rephrasing a sentence here, suggesting an alternative visual there, innocuous, helpful, and maybe it would have been if she hadn't started taking credit. By the end of the meeting, my meticulously crafted ideas were suddenly being summarized under her name. She spoke with such authority, so convincingly, that the room was nodding, impressed. I tried to interject a couple of times, but every time I opened my mouth, she'd smile that perfect patient smile and casually redirect the conversation. I left the meeting feeling deflated, frustrated, and sick to my stomach. I wanted to scream, to call her out, to tell everyone that I had done all of it, but I didn't. I couldn't. Part of me feared ruining the friendship, and another part feared looking petty in front of my colleagues, so I stayed quiet, silently seething as she basked in the recognition I had earned. It didn't end there. Over the next few days, Vanessa started to own the project completely. She sent out emails in her name, scheduled follow-up meetings, and even pitched parts of the campaign to the client herself. I was relegated to background tasks, proofreading slides, organizing files, coordinating schedules. It was like watching someone take a painting I'd spent months creating and slap their signature on it. I tried subtle ways to reclaim some credit. I'd make small notes in emails, casually mention things in meetings, or forward drafts with my name on them. But Vanessa was always one step ahead, charming the right people at the right time. And the worst part? Some colleagues started to genuinely believe she was the brains behind the project. I remember one morning sitting in our tiny break room, staring at my half-drunk coffee and thinking, how did it come to this? Vanessa was laughing with some coworkers, animated and witty, and I felt invisible. I wanted to storm up to her desk and scream, but instead I just sat there, my hands wrapped around the mug like it could anchor me to sanity. That's when the idea hit me. I couldn't confront her directly. Not yet. I needed a plan. But even as I resolved to do that, part of me felt defeated. Could I really trust her again? Could I even save my own work from being swallowed whole by her ambition? And then came the client presentation. I had spent nights preparing it, running through every slide, rehearsing every line, imagining every question they could throw at us. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to shine. Vanessa, of course, made sure I didn't get that chance. She walked into the conference room with that same smug confidence, smiled at the client, and started presenting my ideas as if they were her own. I sat there, heart pounding, trying to figure out if I should intervene. But she had done her homework, framed it perfectly, and before I knew it, the client was nodding, impressed. My name never came up once. I wanted to throw my laptop across the room. I wanted to tell everyone that she had stolen the work, that I was the one who had spent weeks on this campaign, but the words wouldn't come out. I felt trapped, silent, humiliated. The entire presentation was a blur. By the time it ended, Vanessa was basking in congratulations, and I just walked out. As I left the building that evening, the Chicago wind biting at my cheeks, I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could someone I trusted betray me like this? Someone I called my friend? I replayed every interaction in my head, every helpful comment, every suggestion that had subtly overshadowed my work. I could see now how carefully she had maneuvered herself into the spotlight, while I was left in the shadows. But even as I felt crushed, a spark of determination ignited inside me. I wasn't going to let this slide forever. Vanessa could have her moment now, but sooner or later, the truth would come out. I'd make sure of it. And maybe, just maybe, karma had a way of catching up with people like her. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the drafts, emails, and documents I had saved. Proof of my work. I realized then that my fight wasn't just for recognition. It was for myself, my integrity, and the principle that hard work should never be invisible. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know when, but I knew one thing for sure. Vanessa might have stolen the spotlight, but she hadn't stolen my fire. Not yet. And when the time came, she would regret ever underestimating me. I never thought betrayal could feel so suffocating. Not the kind you read about in novels or see in movies, but the quiet, slow-rolling kind that sneaks up on you while you're trying to live your life normally. By the time I fully realized what Vanessa had done, the damage was already done. And worse, everyone around me was convinced she was the genius behind the project I had spent weeks perfecting. It started subtly. I'd walk into the office in the morning, bleary-eyed from another sleepless night trying to tweak my work, only to overhear Vanessa casually chatting with colleagues about the brilliant strategy we implemented. Her words were always inclusive, always framed as teamwork, but the credit line was hers alone. And the worst part? People were nodding along, impressed. She had that talent for persuasion, that effortless charm that made people see her as competent, smart, indispensable. And here I was, standing right behind her, invisible. I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe everyone just forgot who did the actual work in the flurry of deadlines and client emails. But the more I watched, the more obvious it became. Vanessa had made a habit out of taking credit for my work. Every brainstorm, every strategy meeting, every single piece of research I'd done was now being presented as hers. It stung in ways I couldn't articulate. I kept replaying every moment we had spent together, every friendly conversation we'd had. Every time I had trusted her, confided in her, laughed with her, was she using all of it as ammunition to make herself look better? It felt impossible, but the evidence was in front of me. I remember the morning I discovered the first concrete proof. I had been scrolling through my work emails, trying to make sense of the latest client praise. There it was. Vanessa had forwarded one of my detailed campaign drafts to the client, removing my name entirely and adding a few minor edits that made it sound like her idea. My heart sank. I stared at the screen, numb. My careful constructed slides, my painstaking analysis, my late night revisions, all of it being sold as hers. I wanted to cry, scream, collapse, some combination of all three, but instead I did the only thing I could think of. I started documenting everything. Every email, every draft, every timestamp, every note. If this was going to be a war, I needed weapons. And weapons I had. Thousands of lines of proof that could not be denied if only I could find the courage to use them. That same week, Vanessa's behavior escalated. I started noticing it outside the office. She was undermining me socially, subtly planting seeds in conversations, making me look forgetful, incompetent, or overly dramatic. One day, a group of coworkers was chatting about a team outing. I suggested a few ideas and Vanessa jumped in before I could finish, laughing lightly, saying, "Oh, Emily's idea is cute, but I think my plan will really work." Everyone agreed, and I felt a flush of humiliation creep across my cheeks. It wasn't just the office either. Even our mutual friends noticed a shift. Vanessa had this uncanny ability to twist reality in subtle ways, making it seem like she was always the one doing the thoughtful, creative work, while I was, somehow, less capable. I began feeling isolated, even among people I thought I could trust. I started second guessing myself constantly. Was I being paranoid? Was I really being overlooked, or was I imagining it? But then I reminded myself of the evidence I had. Every document, every email chain, every timestamp screamed the truth. I was being cheated, deliberately, and Vanessa was clever, cunning, and far too confident that no one would notice. One afternoon, during a casual check-in meeting with a client, I witnessed it again. Vanessa was presenting our progress, speaking with such authority, such charm, that I felt invisible. My ideas were being discussed as hers, and the client was nodding, impressed. I tried to interject. Actually, that part of the strategy came from, but she cut me off mid-sentence, smiling sweetly at the client and saying, "Oh, Emily and I brainstormed it together, but I fine-tuned it for the presentation." Everyone nodded politely, and I sank back into my chair, defeated. Fine-tuned, not created, not researched, fine-tuned. The smallest word, but it completely erased my contribution. That night, I sat at my desk long after everyone had gone home. I opened all the drafts, emails, and notes I had been saving and compiled them into a single folder. Every step of the process was documented. The original slides, the first rough drafts, the brainstorming notes with my scribbled ideas and margins, even the timestamped emails where I suggested improvements. It was meticulous, almost obsessive, but I didn't care. I needed proof, and I had it. The realization hit me then. Vanessa hadn't just stolen my work. She had stolen my credibility. She had made herself look brilliant while making me seem invisible. And it wasn't just about the project. It was about how she had manipulated perceptions, how she had subtly undermined me at every turn. She had turned people against me without them even knowing it. The next day, I tried to act normal. I smiled at her in the office, made small talk, all while my mind was racing. I was already plotting, already thinking about how I could protect myself and reclaim my reputation. But the tension between us was palpable. Vanessa had no idea that I knew the full extent of her actions, and I intended to keep it that way, for now. Over the next few days, I watched her arrogance grow. She became careless, cocky even. She started taking credit for not just my work, but ideas from other team members as well, weaving them seamlessly into presentations as if she had invented them. She was overconfident, thinking no one would catch on. And that overconfidence was her weakness. I also noticed how she manipulated our mutual friends. During lunch breaks or after-work drinks, she would subtly mention things I supposedly said or did, twisting stories in ways that made her seem supportive, clever, or generous while making me appear self-absorbed or insecure. It was like watching a master puppeteer in action, and I was the only one who could see the strings. But here's the thing about being the kind of person I am. I don't give up easily. I might have been underestimated, overlooked, and even humiliated, but I was determined. I spent late nights analyzing patterns, making lists of interactions, and planning my next moves. I started quietly talking to colleagues I trusted, planting seeds of awareness without being confrontational. I knew that exposing Vanessa directly could backfire if I wasn't careful. She had charm, after all, and people were already predisposed to believe her. One Friday, the tipping point came. We had a client call scheduled, and Vanessa was supposed to present again. I had been preparing behind the scenes, making subtle notes, drafting follow-up questions, and gathering evidence. But when the call began, she immediately took the lead, speaking with her usual confidence, presenting ideas as if they had all been hers. And this time, she went further. She dismissed a suggestion from a junior colleague as impractical and immediately rephrased it as her own, ignoring my own contribution entirely. I felt my hands clench into fists under the table. My jaw tightened. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to pull the laptop across the table and point at every slide and say, "This is mine, all of it." But I didn't. I stayed silent, letting the frustration and anger burn inside me because I knew I needed to be strategic. After the call, Vanessa leaned back in her chair, smiling smugly, clearly proud of her performance. I could see it in her eyes, the satisfaction of someone who believed she was untouchable. And I knew then that if I didn't act carefully, I would lose everything. My reputation, my hard work, maybe even my friendship with people I still cared about. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to let her continue to manipulate, steal, and charm her way to success at my expense. I started organizing all my proof, creating a timeline of events, documenting every stolen idea, every credit she took, every subtle manipulation, emails, drafts, meeting notes, timestamp messages. All of it became ammunition. And while Vanessa was becoming increasingly careless, flaunting her supposed brilliance in front of everyone, I began to feel a sense of empowerment. The more arrogant she became, the easier it would be to expose her. The more careless she was, the more mistakes she would make. I just had to be patient. By the end of the week, I had a folder on my desktop labeled Evidence. It was meticulous, thorough, undeniable. I had finally started to believe that I could win back my work, my reputation, and my dignity. Vanessa, meanwhile, had no idea what was coming. She continued to bask in the praise, believing she was untouchable. She laughed, joked, and subtly undermined others, thinking herself clever, but I could see the cracks forming in her facade, the tiny hints of arrogance that would eventually lead to her downfall. And as I shut down my laptop that Friday evening, exhausted but determined, I made a silent vow to myself. This wasn't just about work anymore. It was about standing up for myself, reclaiming what was mine, and showing everyone, including Vanessa, that integrity and talent cannot be stolen forever. The betrayal had been revealed. The evidence was in place. And now it was only a matter of time before karma did its work. I'll be honest, I never thought I'd feel a small sense of satisfaction watching someone like Vanessa squirm. Not because I'm cruel, but because it was poetic justice unfolding right before my eyes. By now, I had spent weeks quietly documenting every stolen idea, every manipulated conversation, every subtle twist she had inflicted on my career. I had proof, mountains of it, emails, slides, timestamps, meeting notes, even chat logs, everything. But I didn't just want revenge. I wanted a calculated, undeniable revelation. I wanted karma to do its job without me having to look petty in the process. The first step was subtlety. I didn't confront her. I didn't storm into a meeting and scream, "This was my idea." I didn't call out her lies in front of the client because I knew how dangerous that could be. Vanessa was good at spinning stories. People trusted her, so I started small. I leaked proof quietly, strategically. A draft of an email here, a timestamped file there, enough to hint that her brilliance wasn't entirely her own. And slowly, very slowly, the cracks began to show. It started with a client call. I was supposed to be on mute, just observing while Vanessa presented a new campaign update. Everything seemed fine until the client asked a question about a specific strategy I had created weeks ago. Vanessa, caught off guard, stumbled for an answer. Her voice faltered slightly, and for just a moment, I saw her mask slip. Well, we thought this would work best, she started, her eyes darting nervously across the room. The client tilted their head. I remember Emily suggesting something similar a few weeks back. How did this evolve into your current plan? The words hit her like a lightning bolt. She tried to recover, to spin a story that would make it look like she had merely refined my idea, but the client wasn't convinced. They asked another question, more detailed, and she fumbled again. I stayed muted, calm, professional, observing quietly. I could feel the tide turning. Back at the office, I noticed Vanessa's demeanor start to shift. She became twitchy, more alert, overcompensating in meetings, repeating facts she wasn't entirely sure of. Every time she opened her mouth, her lies became harder to sustain. A colleague would casually mention a fact or a piece of work I had done and she'd flinch. I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to patch the holes before anyone noticed. Meanwhile, I began to quietly reclaim my presence. I started contributing in ways that were undeniable, leaving trails that no one could dispute. A suggestion in a team chat, a small insight in a meeting, a meticulously documented report. I made sure people saw my competence without even having to say it outright. It was subtle, almost invisible, but effective. Slowly, recognition began to trickle back my way. Vanessa didn't notice at first. She was too wrapped up in her own performance, too confident that her charm would carry her through. She didn't realize that the seeds I had planted were growing, that colleagues were starting to see inconsistencies in her stories, that the client's doubts were piling up, and then, of course, she started panicking. Her first major mistake came in a team presentation. She was presenting the next phase of the campaign to upper management, and I noticed a small error in one of her slides. An idea clearly attributed to her that was mine, with a timestamp proving I created it weeks earlier. I didn't point it out directly. Instead, I casually sent a corrected version to my manager, with the proper attributions highlighted in the footnotes. The next day, during the review, a manager asked Vanessa about the slide. She tried to explain it away, but the evidence was right there. She stammered, her confidence faltering. I stayed quiet, smiling politely, letting the moment play out. Management started asking more questions, looking between the slide, Vanessa, and me. For the first time, the truth was visible, subtle but undeniable. Vanessa tried to cover it up with charm, jokes, and deflection, but it wasn't working. The more she tried to spin, the more she tangled herself in lies. Her panic was palpable. I watched as her arrogance, her overconfidence, finally began to betray her. It wasn't just at work either. Vanessa's manipulations outside the office started to crumble too. Mutual friends who had unknowingly repeated her stories began to question inconsistencies. Small remarks in casual conversations contradicted her narratives. She tried to charm her way through it, but people were noticing, and they were starting to remember details that aligned with my version. Slowly, the web she had spun around herself began to unravel. Meanwhile, I continued my strategy, carefully orchestrated. Every contribution I made was documented, every insight traceable, every interaction noted. I didn't have to fight loudly. I let the evidence speak for itself, and it was working. Recognition began to shift subtly back toward me. Colleagues who had previously praised Vanessa started acknowledging my input. asking for my insights and referencing my ideas. Even small victories felt monumental. One morning, I got an email from the client that left me grinning quietly at my desk. They wanted to discuss my original proposal in greater detail for the next phase of the campaign. Vanessa was included in the email chain, but she couldn't overshadow me this time. The client's questions, their attention, their interest, it was all directed at me. I felt the first flicker of vindication. Vanessa noticed a shift almost immediately. Her panic became more obvious. She started micromanaging, over-explaining, and repeating herself. In one meeting, she even contradicted a statement she had made the day before, trying to cover a detail I had revealed in an email. Everyone noticed, including our boss. The cracks in her facade were no longer subtle, they were wide, impossible to ignore. And still, I stayed calm. I didn't gloat, I didn't confront her publicly. I had learned the hard way that patience was my ally. Every mistake she made, every flub, every slip-up, I recorded quietly, left no trace of my involvement, and let the consequences unfold naturally. Watching karma in motion was almost intoxicating. By the end of the week, the atmosphere in the office had shifted. People were starting to notice who was actually driving the project, who had the real insights, who was consistently delivering. Vanessa's arrogance was turning into visible anxiety. She tried to regain control, scheduling extra meetings, sending long emails with elaborate explanations, trying desperately to reassert her authority. But the more she tried, the more obvious it became that she was out of her depth. And me, I was quietly, steadily rising. Recognition was returning to me, not in loud accolades, but in subtle nods, questions, and requests for my input. I had the proof, I had the timing, and I had the patience to see it through. Vanessa's mistakes, her arrogance, her carelessness, it was all playing right into my hands. The best part, she still had no idea. She didn't know that every misstep, every contradiction, every tiny oversight was being documented, stored, and noted for the right moment. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she was still in control, and that was exactly what made the eventual reckoning so satisfying to imagine. By Friday, I could feel the momentum shifting. Colleagues were beginning to ask questions about decisions, seeking my input directly. Vanessa, increasingly frantic, was trying to assert herself over every discussion, but it was clear she was losing credibility. Even small victories felt huge. I had reclaimed small pieces of what was mine, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the larger truth came to light. As I shut down my laptop that evening, I allowed myself a small, private smile. The first stage of karma had begun. Vanessa's arrogance, her manipulations, her false sense of invincibility, they were all starting to unravel. And I, quietly, strategically, was emerging stronger, more confident, and ready for the next phase. The tide was turning, and when it fully did, Vanessa would realize that stealing from someone like me was a mistake she would regret for a long, long time. I never thought I'd feel so calm while chaos unfolded around me. By this point, everything had been meticulously documented. The emails, the drafts, the timestamps, the countless iterations of ideas that had all been mine. Vanessa had made a critical mistake. She had become too comfortable, too arrogant, and too careless. Her confidence, which had once been intimidating, was now her downfall. And I was ready. It started subtly. Our client scheduled a review meeting to discuss the campaign's progress, and unlike previous presentations, this time, I was asked to join as a co-presenter. My heart was pounding, but this wasn't a confrontation. It was an opportunity to show the truth quietly, professionally, and undeniably. I had spent weeks preparing for this, ensuring that every point I made could be backed with evidence. Vanessa didn't know what was coming, and that gave me an edge. As the meeting began, Vanessa launched into her usual confident spiel, detailing her ideas with the charm that had fooled everyone before. But as soon as the client asked a question about a specific strategy, one that I had proposed and documented months ago, I leaned forward, calmly showing my notes on my laptop, subtly highlighting the timestamps and email threads that proved the idea originated with me. There was a pause in the room. Vanessa's confident smile faltered, replaced with a tight-lipped frown. The client tilted their head, clearly noticing the discrepancy. "Emily, can you walk us through how this evolved?" they asked. My explanation was professional, concise, and backed by evidence. Every step was laid out clearly, every contribution traceable to me. Vanessa's face went pale. I could almost hear the panic roaring in her mind as she tried to interject, to spin it as a joint effort, but the proof was irrefutable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't attack her. I let the facts speak for themselves. And in that silence, the truth finally began to surface. After the meeting, the ripple effect was immediate. Colleagues who had once admired Vanessa's supposed brilliance started asking questions, reviewing emails, and noticing inconsistencies. Management called her in separately, requesting clarification on certain contributions. She tried to spin excuses, claiming minor adjustments and refinements were her input, but it was transparent. The timestamps, drafts, and emails all pointed directly to me. Her credibility was crumbling, piece by piece. The office atmosphere changed overnight. Vanessa, once untouchable, became tense. guarded and visibly frustrated. Every interaction with her was now laced with subtle fear. Fear of exposure, fear of losing recognition, fear of facing consequences for her actions. It was almost surreal to watch someone so arrogant unravel, but I reminded myself that this wasn't personal revenge. It was accountability. I didn't gloat. I didn't confront her publicly or revel in her discomfort. That wasn't my style, and frankly, I wanted to maintain my professionalism. Instead, I scheduled a private conversation with her, away from prying eyes. We met in a quiet corner of the office, and she looked at me with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Emily, look, she started, her voice shaky. I held up a hand. "Vanessa, I don't want to make this messy. I just want you to understand that taking credit for someone else's work isn't just unethical, it's damaging. Not just to them, but to you too." She opened her mouth, probably to argue, to justify, but I continued calmly. The work was mine. The ideas, the strategy, the research, it all came from me. I've documented everything. You can spin excuses all you want, but the facts speak louder than words. She stayed silent. For once, I didn't need to say more. The tension in the room said everything. And in that silence, I realized something profound. I didn't need to tear her down to stand tall. My dignity, my professionalism, and my unwavering commitment to the truth were enough. In the days that followed, management formally recognized my contributions. Emails were sent, meetings acknowledged my work, and colleagues who had previously overlooked me now sought my input. Even clients reached out directly, praising the clarity, creativity, and thoroughness of my ideas. I felt a wave of validation, not just professionally, but personally. I had been patient, strategic, and ethical, and it had paid off. Vanessa tried to recover. She approached me a few times, offering half-hearted apologies, claiming stress or miscommunication. But I listened politely and kept my distance. I didn't need her approval or friendship to feel accomplished. I had reclaimed my work, my reputation, and my confidence. And in that, I found something even more valuable: self-respect. A week later, during a team meeting, our manager made an announcement. "Emily has been instrumental in driving this campaign. Her strategy and execution have been exceptional. We want to formally recognize her contributions and discuss her upcoming promotion." The room erupted in applause. I felt a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet vindication. Vanessa was there too, but she didn't clap. She avoided my gaze, her earlier arrogance replaced with resignation. I didn't revel in it. I simply allowed the moment to sink in, knowing I had earned every bit of it. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. Friendship, trust, betrayal. They were complicated, messy, and sometimes painful. I had loved and trusted Vanessa, and she had let me down. But I realized that betrayal, while devastating, didn't have to define me. I could choose my response, and in doing so, I could reclaim my power. I thought about all the lessons I had learned: the importance of standing up for oneself, the value of patience and strategy, and the undeniable strength of integrity. I didn't need to fight with anger or bitterness. I didn't need to seek revenge to feel justified. I simply needed to be diligent, professional, and true to myself. And that's exactly what I had done. The next morning at work, I felt lighter, freer. Colleagues greeted me with warmth, clients sought my guidance, and my manager's nods of approval were more than just professional validation. They were reassurance that I had navigated a difficult situation with grace and intelligence. Vanessa still worked in the office, but the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Her influence was diminished, and she had no choice but to acknowledge the truth, however begrudgingly. As I walked to my desk, I glanced around the office. I thought about the challenges, the late nights, the frustration, and the heartbreak, and I smiled, because I knew something important. Standing up for yourself isn't always easy, and it's rarely fun in the moment, but it is always worth it. I had been underestimated, overshadowed, and even betrayed, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. I had reclaimed my work, my voice, and my dignity, and in doing so, I had learned that true recognition doesn't come from taking shortcuts or charming your way to the top. It comes from dedication, perseverance, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Vanessa's reckoning had come, but more importantly, my redemption had arrived, and for the first time in weeks, I felt completely, undeniably at peace. I didn't need applause, dramatic confrontations, or revenge. I had something better: respect for myself, recognition from those who mattered, and the knowledge that I had handled a betrayal with grace and strength. And that, I realized, was worth more than any fleeting victory someone like Vanessa could ever hope for. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.